Your neighbors must love you.
Yeah, not so much. Good morning, Wackadoo Racing Channel, and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing part 4 of motor, swap, and turbo in Project Blitz. Last week we were able to get the exhaust manifold all built up so that we can get the turbo mounted, and we are going to be working on putting in a cooling system today, hopefully. Cody's working this morning. I need to be doing injector O-rings on the Triumph. Lucky me. So I'm going to go ahead and knock that out this morning while we wait for him. If you're waiting on some of the other content, say the Triumph, we're going to be doing shakedown on it as soon as I get these fuel injector O-rings swapped out so that we can have it more prepared, so as soon as this thing starts driving, we can start driving them around again. I also have parts coming for the motor, so I can try and put that together because we're still waiting to hear that run. And as soon as this thing's out of here, we're going to bring the truck back in for a little while so we can start doing all that fun stuff we were talking about. So I might have a few parts that I'm starting to accumulate so we can do that fun stuff as soon as I get the chance. If you guys want to see this thing coming along, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the little bell notification if you guys want to see us update as it goes, because we are posting videos after a week in between. So we're actually further along than it seems when we post the video. So if you guys want to see where we're at, keep you up to date, hit the little bell. But for now, I got to get cracking on that thing. So obviously that was super eventful. Not the most exciting project we had to do, but it had to happen. Previously, one of the injector O-rings had failed, and I was making it so every time we fired up the car, it was just running gas down the block, which obviously was going to end up catching on fire. So there's actually a couple of different seals that run on the top of the injector on the Miata. Let's see here. That little fella right there had a nick in it. So it only takes one. That was enough. So that seems to be fixed. We're gonna let her warm up, get some voltage back in the battery. I'm gonna replace a couple of vacuum lines this week, put some gas in it, and hopefully be driving it around next weekend, get it all cleaned up, so I can go ahead and stretch her legs a little bit and get that axle tested. That way we can make sure that we can drive around, hit boost. But she's running. So it looks like our powwow for the night is trying to figure out what we're going to do with both the intercooler and the radiator. So there's a couple of different places that we can put that for packaging purposes, but there's a couple places we can put that for packaging purposes. So we're kind of in the middle of a powwow debate about where it's going to go. Your guess is as good as ours. We'll get back with you as soon as we figure it out. For now, we're going to drink about it. So it looks like what we're going to end up doing is down below in the nose cone there is a cross brace up at the front. Kind of difficult to see, but unfortunately it does kind of get in the way. Previously we had mocked up the radiator up against it, and that worked out really well, and we didn't have to cut out that part of the support. However, with the oversized radiator fan we're going to try and put on it, it's going to end up needing to go. So we're going to remove it and then probably put in a different support a little further back so that we can put the radiator right there, and that gives us the ability to rake the radiator at whatever angle we need to get to the fill port and all that stuff. So for now, we're going to cut it out and replace it later. Nothing but room in there. Look how much room. Shove your arm in there.
There's like room for activities and stuff. Bunk beds.
You can do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I can sleep down there.
So much room.
Now let's fill it up with some more stuff. Okay, so he's going to go ahead and cut out that bar. You saw that. We went and re-clocked the turbo. He's going to end up mounting the intercooler. We're working on that so that we can try and figure out where the intercooler spacing is going to go. He already made one of the cuts in the nose cone, so we'll go ahead and get that mocked up, and then we'll go ahead and show you guys what that looks like. We took a little bit of a break for food, and for anyone that's curious what it's like living in Southern California. Daniel's dad's office got broken into downtown by some crackhead that kicked the door in, so we had to take a little bit of a break to go have that guy arrested.
Good times.
So that happened.
He's still alive.
It was great.
He's fine.
He's fine.
Nobody hurt him. But anyway, we had to take a little bit of a break. So a little bit less headway, but there's things happening. So we're going to get the intercooler mounted. Cody.
Yo.
Tell me about your fancy new intercooler.
Well,
Not that thing.
that's not an intercooler, but down here, take a look.
Oh, it's already in the car.
Yeah, it's already in the car. So
Hey, look at that.
that would be a Flying Miata intercooler. And believe it or not, she's mounted. I mean, I could shake the whole car with it. So ended up taking the Flying Miata brackets that came with it that already had a 90-degree bend for the ports, and just made some custom bends to it so it comes up and actually matches the underside of our front nose section, and then it's bolted straight to the OE metal from the Opel. And then we did the same thing as we're going to do on the radiator. We've got rubber bushings onto the bottom dowels, and that's slotted into the sheet metal, so it's just going to sit on those rubber bushings, and we'll make a bracket for the top so this thing can cant the way it needs to. Got a fan, a puller fan coming for the back end, sitting at about 1800 CFM. So even though we have a fairly small radiator, it's going to pull air.
That's a lot of CFM.
That's a lot of
displacement.
Yeah, for a 12-inch fan.
What are you thinking on the grill? What are your thoughts there? Are we gonna
No grill.
modify it, not run it, put it back?
No grill. The grill, if you hadn't seen it before, was a very wide mesh, and it's not going to hide it anyways. And we're not hiding.
Yeah, we're building a super sleeper by hiding the intercooler, because nobody will ever see that.
Not sticking out of the hood most of the way. So I'm thinking no grill, and because that's the only Flying Miata component on the car for now, I think we're going to do a new logo on it and maybe paint it. Maybe.
I like this idea.
Custom. So at least then, rolling into Cars and Coffees or whatever, they're going to see the intercooler. That's a given. And then they'll see the logo and then chase the car down to find out what it means.
We're going to try and get the radiator bottom mounts drilled in and mounted so we can call it a night. It's already about 11, so we're going to try and get part of it mounted so that we can do the rest of it on Monday. Let's show you what we came up with for the radiator. So, way down here in the nose cone, we've got our radiator. Now, it is a little bit of distance away from the outlet of the cooling, but realistically, when you think about the distance here, it just looks big because the engine bay is tight. Now, a lot of this is going to end up being aluminum hardline. We're going to make aluminum hoses with rubber junctions on the ends to go from here to there, so everything should flow nicely, and it shouldn't have a whole lot of problems keeping up with the demand, as well as the enormous, nearly 2,000 CFM fan he's going to bolt to the back of that bad boy. So that should help a lot with the cooling, as well as the fact that this thing is canted downward. So we already have this giant gaping hole that was cut by the previous owner to deal with probably rust abatement or something else. But since most cars dissipate their heat out of the bottom of the engine bay, not the top, that's going to help us a ton because it's going to be able to evacuate that heat downward pretty fast. That being said, our space is utilized very well considering the fact that these hood hinges are very difficult to work around.
Exactly. I mean, we didn't have very many spots we could actually put it. It was either back here canted as it sits, or it was shoved in here under the hood hinge, canted even more aggressively. And with it sitting up front up here, with that fan that we're putting on this, it's actually going to create vacuum against the intercooler as well. So that'll help with cooling everything down, not just the radiator. So a lot of good things with what we have here in this mounting position. It's going to look a little funky until we get it all plumbed in, but once it's plumbed in and everything's colorized and pretty, then...
Now, what was the motivation behind keeping the large hoop-shaped hood hinges? Why not just go with pin-on-hood?
Because we didn't want to be race car. You know, it's kind of a race car thing. You see a guy show up with hood pins and he lifts his whole hood off and sets it on the roof. You think he's got something massive under the hood. While this is a very good upgrade, we didn't want that. We want to be able to maintain the flip-up hood and keep that little aesthetic for this car when we go to the car shows, when we go to Cars and Coffees. anytime really. We just wanted to have that aesthetic and keep it in place. So even though it is a pain in the butt to keep this thing here, it has to stay. It's just one of the things.
We still have to make top mounts, something to lock in the top of the radiator. We're gonna start working on all those cooling lines. Now, we're already gonna have to be doing a lot of fabrication and TIG welding on the aluminum lines for all the intercooler piping. So that's gonna be a good time to work out what we're gonna do for the cooling lines on the radiator as well. So look forward to a very shiny octopus coming up in the near future in this engine bay. We were able to get the radiator mounted. So it is supported top and bottom, and the big Mishimoto 2000 CFM fan that Cody ordered came in, so we got that installed. We were able to test it. So here's where it's actually sitting.
It sits nice and tidy up under the nose cone. Gives us room for the hood hinge, gives us room side to side, and it's butted up right at the bottom of the intercooler as well. So it worked out pretty well. We've got space for everything, and it still gives us plenty of room here for air to go down, hit that stream once the fan's running.
We're talking about possibly opening up these little snorkel vents, because now, although they used to be pretty much non-functional, now they've actually got direct aim at the top of the radiator. So that might be a thing. We might open these up a hair, but this thing moves a significant amount of air.
A lot.
And with the way that it's canted down, almost no air travels across the top of the hood, but a huge amount of air comes out the bottom. Let's give you guys an example of how much air those fans are actually moving. Now, while it's not a real world example, because obviously you're not here to feel how much wind is actually moving, the car is not hot, so we can't use the thermal camera just yet to show you how much heat's actually coming out of everything. We can use a real simple paper test just so you can see where the air travel is actually moving. So that looks like this. So I think some of our overheating issues are starting to dissipate.
Not very worried about it anymore. Going with the smaller radiator, there were some concerns, but given the fact that we actually tested it and it does pull vacuum through the intercooler as well, got no concerns about it pulling air, cooling off the motor and the engine. I got no issues.
And then we got our Wastegate to V-band adapter in today. This needs some work. The company that manufactured it warped it pretty bad when they welded it, so we're going to plane that tomorrow. But we'll be able to get this down to an exhaust and start getting that routed too.
Yeah, it's going to curve down and around and then kick out right next to the steering shaft. But should be fine. We've got room. We've already tested it. We know we've got room.
I think that's it for tonight. Let's hit it again tomorrow.
All right, guys, we're back at it tonight. Back in the garage, looking at getting some radiator piping going. We've been experimenting with a thing or two here and there. We're actually going to be able to use some of the bends off of the existing Miata radiator hose. We're going to go way up under there. It's actually not that far, but we're going to go like 90 off of the existing housing, and then hard tube in, and another rubber off of the radiator itself. Should be fairly simple. We got some tricks along the way. We'll give you a little rundown on that with that tube once it's in there. But what do you think, D? Is that about cut right?
Yeah, I would think so, because we're going to be going. So here's our absolute closest, and then here. So if we're able to work our bend a little bit and get us out here, we'll have a nice hard line with room to put rubber on both sides. It should be nice and cleanly, out of the way, and self-contained.
Yeah. All right. Don't know if we covered it before or not, but another little trick for you.
So when cutting, grinding, or working with aluminum in almost any way, a really easy way to save some of your consumables, like in this case our sanding belt or our disc or your cutoff wheels, is just take generic soap like Irish Spring bar soap and run it across your grinder. Now this is just the little nub I have left, but running it across that will fill the pores so that once you start getting some of that removed material from your aluminum, it doesn't clog the pores of your sanding or cutting equipment. Another cool trick here is, if you haven't seen these are deburrs. You can get these at any metalworking supply store. So what we've got here is on the end of our tube, we got that rough cut. I'm gonna go ahead and get that cleaned up. So you just take that edge, and it takes off that nice clean edge right there. I'll show you that again. That way, if you're working with steel or aluminum or any other hard material like that, it takes off that nice clean edge, makes it look nice and presentable, and keeps you from cutting yourself while you're working with it. But in this case, we need that extra room because we're going to be using this edge as a guide so that we can put a flare on the end so the hoses don't pop off.
So on our bead roller, we did get a bunch of little dies to come with it, but for applications like this, what do we got?
So typically with our narrowest die for doing standard bead, what we can do is we can remove this top die or bottom die, whatever order you'd like to do it in, offset your lower, and then replace it with just a standard washer. Now you want that washer to be larger than the diameter of the output shaft, but you need it to be smaller than the interior diameter of your tube. So we can slip it like that, and then we're just going to set it in place, and we're going to roll it around, and that should give us a nice raised lip to put our tube on.
So came out of the water housing, got a rubber 90 to our aluminum pipe, and then we've got a small rubber up here to the radiator. So that one's squared away. On the flip side, down here at the bottom where the water actually comes out of the block, it comes out of the block and did a 90 that way, and then a 90 straight back in towards the sidewall here. Actually was lining up right with our steering rack, so that was an issue. But I think D came up with a masterful solution.
So this was clocked. If it sat on car, it came out directly perpendicular to the block, which aimed it right at the steering rod. So I just cut it and then rotated it, beveled it, and tigged it back together at an angle that'll clear the block and the steering rack, so that the steering rod, so that all we have to do is make a rubber 90, and then we can do our hard line from there.
Right. So we're going to come off of this with rubber 90. That way, back towards the front of the car, which then come through, and it'll go to, you can't see it, but right down in here, the bottom port. So that'll give us a full loop system for the radiator, and I think we can mark that off the list.
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Yeah, cooling lines are done. Then we just gotta make exhaust and intercooler piping.
These over here, making short work of it. Last update for the night. We ended up getting basically the cooling system done for now until we start digging into the actual intercooler piping. I think tomorrow. I'll give you guys a little look. So you can see down at the bottom of the radiator, we actually have rubber hose that we were able to salvage off of the Miata parts that we had, to the aluminum piping coming through and ending up over here at the actual water housing for the motor, with another rubber coming up where we did that cut and re-weld. So everything all in all is done for cooling, with the exception of intercooler, which we'll dive into. Obviously you guys will call us on it, but obviously we're missing some bands. We know that. We're gonna get some nice shiny brand new ones, make this thing.
We're gonna go buy all the right size,
yes,
so that we can tuck all the hardware underneath, so you don't really see them. That way, once we cut all the rubber nice and straight and clean, get a nice razor and make it all nice, it'll look a little more tidy. And that way all of the hardware is new and stainless, so that depending on whether or not he wants to leave the tubing raw or anodized, either way, it'll look nice and when it's all finished. So for now, keeping in mind the motor is going to come back out. So this is still mock-up phase, but we're done with the cooling system.
Yeah, and speaking of anodized, this just to give you an idea of what he's talking about, I found
anodizing spray.
A yellow anodizing spray that's semi-transparent. So with a nice brushed finish underneath it, I think it's really going to accent well with the rest of the car. If that's the course we decide to go. And there's all kinds of things that we could do that color in the engine bay. After all, the engine bay is going to be completely black. We're going to do a nice fresh coat of paint on it on the inside. After everything's mocked up, pull it out, paint the engine bay, shove it all back in, get it going. So still a lot of work to do, but we're checking big things off the list as needed.
Start doing intercooler piping.
Yeah, so like I said, I got some fittings coming in, some silicone from Summit, some reducers, because our intercooler is at about 2.5, our piping is 2-inch, so got to reduce some things, got to make it happen, got to make it work, but we're getting there. Parts are coming in, and we can at least start mocking stuff up and making headway on the rest of what we need to do. So I think that's it for tonight. But
unmentioned, on the lower tubes, to actually bend the aluminum tube, we don't have a tubing bender here, so we just slice cut 3/4 of the way through the tube every inch or so, and then took it out to the tree in the front yard and bent it with the tree.
Caveman strength.
And then just TIG welded it. So it's kind of a cheater's pie cut, but it holds, it's fine, and it made the bend. So you don't have to have all the fancy tools to still get it done.
Enter sponsorship here.
Oh, if you want to send us a bender, we won't argue with you.
There you go. Shameless plug.
That's actually going to be it for this one. We ended up ordering a few more parts, like the V-band flanges and some silicone 90s and reducers, so that we can start doing both the exhaust and the intercooler piping. However, we are going to have a little bit of a hiccup depending on what the dimensions are on whether or not we're going to run the Skunk 2 manifold. So as it turns out, it does sit further out and a little bit lower than the factory manifold. So depending on whether or not Cody wants to actually run that and if it'll fit in the car, that'll change where the intercooler piping is going to end up. So we got to figure that out first. We're going to be right back at it tomorrow and hopefully have some of those parts in hand this weekend so they can really start knocking some things out. Wagadoo out.